and welcome to the Pragati Vichar Literature Festival's frontlist session. So today's theme for the session is multifaceted narratives, crafting stories across genres and media. I am Ritika and I will be your host for the next hopefully an hour, and I will be asking you multiple questions surrounding your work and your books. So before that, I will actually like to introduce both of you. So let's start with Anirban Bhattacharya here. Anirban Bhattacharya, he wears many hats, a best-selling author, a stand-up comedian, a movie actor, a television and media professional, a poet, and a motivational speaker. He is the author of the number one true crime bestseller, The Deadly Dozen, which has been endorsed by actors like John Abraham, Ayushmann Khurrana, and Anurag Kashyap, and India's Money Heist. His young adult fiction, The Adventurous Six, has received critical acclaim, and his debut collection of poetry, Mumblings and Musings, has been praised by celebrities like Amitabh Bachchan and Amir Khan. He's the creator, producer, and writer of one of India's most loved true crime shows on television, Savdhan India. His day job is as a television content producer, having produced hit TV shows on Indian television channels like Crime Patrol, Fear Files, and Ishq Kills. Welcome, Anirban. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
You can call me. Usually, Bengali names are tongue twisters, so you can
Yeah.
you can call me AB. That's fine.
AB. Okay, that's great. Okay, on the other hand is Juggi Bhasin. Juggi, I'm hoping I am pronouncing your name correctly.
Yeah, you got it right.
Okay, perfect. All right. So Juggi Bhasin was one of the first Indian television journalists in India who joined Doordarshan News in 1987. He has many landmark coverages to his name, including the demolition of the Babri Masjid in 1992 and the first ever interview of an Indian journalist with the North Korean leader Kim Il-sung in the same year. He has also been a senior anchor for Lok Sabha television. Jaggi Bhasin has five successful published novels to his credit. His book, The Terrorist, was a national level bestseller. Also runs a successful social media platform called the CAA Show, which is Conversations and Analysis. The CAA Show analyzes current political and social events. Jaggi Bhasin is also a reputed theatre actor well known in Delhi theatre circles. That's great to hear, and welcome, Jaggi Bhasin, to you too. Uh, so I would like to begin with my questions now. So my first question to you both is that since your background it seems very diverse, it spans across diverse fields like film, advertising, linguistics, and other aspects. How have these varied professional experiences shaped your perspectives on, let's say, storytelling? And in what specific ways do you draw from your unique experiences and unique expertise when crafting the fictional worlds that you create? Let's start with Anirban.
Right. Hi. First of all, Jaggi, you're an amazing legend. So it's an honor to be sharing, the platform with you. Um, Absolutely. I mean, you've the kind of coverage you've done is amazing. Um,
Thank you, AB. Thank you so much.
so
But
that's it, huh? मतलब बस और
we
नहीं
can
और
start a mutual admiration society, AB.
नहीं हाँ मतलब और रुलाओगे क्या और रुलाओगे क्या yeah, so I think for an author, the best experience is to live life and to be open to experiences, and to observe things. That is just half of it. The other half is to be able to recall it at the right moment, at the right time, and fit it into the right characters or situations or plot lines. I think because of the real life experiences, that sort of helps us a lot. At least it's helped me a lot to write. That I can borrow things. I'm open to experiences. I never say no to anything. It's one life, so at the end of the day, what we take with us are just memories and experiences. So just say yes and move on in life. So I think that has helped different kind of experiences, and especially in my last book. which is called The Hills Are Burning. It's a memoir. It's a coming of age Bildungsroman memoir of me growing up in Kalimpong during the Gorkha land agitation. Things that I saw as a teenager in a boarding school. So again, if I hadn't experienced that, I would not be able to write about it. So yeah, I guess that's the long and short of it.
Great to hear, AB. What about you, Jackie?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you, AB, and thank you so much for uh, for those really kind words, and thank you for bringing me on this show. I completely agree with what AB has said. Those are words of wisdom, and they are actually very true. I'll also recall one of my experiences which helped me write. But before I do that, just a quick point. I think all media forms are. It's art actually at the end of the day. They are interconnected. um, the discipline is a little different, and I'll give you an example. I was in news, television news for a long time. So whether you are doing television news that is 1 or 2 minute capsules, or whether you are doing a newspaper column, at the end of the day, you're producing what is called copy. And when you move to creative writing, fiction, non-fiction, or whatever, um, and unfortunately, I have to say, I'm not going to take names, but a lot of big time senior journalists within quotes, they fall at the final hurdle because they carry the same copy into creative writing. So the first thing you need to do is to disabuse yourself of that particular genre and step into real creative writing. I mean, it's a difficult process. So my short point being that all art forms are interlinked, but they're also different at the same time. And you have to understand that particular art form, medium, before you exercise or you start, producing your stuff. So that's the first point. And second point, I'll share another experience as AB has done, which is again, and AB, I would love to read your, I haven't read Hills Are Burning, but I would love to read your book because it's a very pertinent topic. Great. I'll buy that from Amazon today, and I'll send you my review also. But yeah, wonderful. It's a great topic, actually. I would say. Just a quick one, by the way. I have written 6 books. My new sixth book, "Those Who Wait," was released a few months back. Uh, I'll share this very poignant experience, and that was, the day in the morning when the Babri Masjid fell. I was there with my team, with my camera team. We recorded the entire thing. We sent the feed to Delhi, and near escape for me. I was almost lynched by the car sevaks there. But anyway, that's a different story. So I took a train back from Lucknow railway station back to Delhi. And there was, at that time, I was a news person. There was no thought of ever writing books or anything of that sort. Nothing had entered my mind. And I stepped into the bogie of the train, and it was near empty. There was just me and my camera team. There was practically nobody else. But there was this old person, gentleman, a Muslim gentleman, and he could make out from the skull cap and all that. And he was literally in the last seat, covering, he was like completely, he didn't want to attract any attention to himself. And I'm narrating this incident because almost immediately after the masjid fell, the riots had broken out practically all over, you know, uh, uh, practically all over the country, actually, in a way. So me being me, I just went up to the person and I said, I don't even remember the exact words, but something to the effect, कि आप सब ठीक है, आप बहुत डरे हुए लग रहे हैं. So he just, he kind of folded his hands and he shrunk even more, and he says कि बस दुआ करिए कि हम किसी तरह दिल्ली सही सलामत पहुंच जाए. That's it. Nothing very dramatic, just a line. But I don't know, it stayed with me. And probably the germination of the idea of to write my first novel, fiction novel, The Terrorist, actually came from there. So it was not some explosive thing or something which was happening, but just, sometimes these words, sometimes a small incident can trigger or set off something which is inside you, a latent process, and then it germinates into creativity.
That is
Your
very truly
your
said.
story about man with the folded hands reminds me of that stark image of the man with the folded hands in Gujarat at the Godhra riots. I mean, things haven't changed much, have they? Uh, the things continue. I just want to ask you, Jaggi, you've never thought of writing a non-fiction book about your experiences, or you've already done? And
No, maybe I'm so much in love with fiction. Though I agree, non-fiction is the way to go. I completely agree. I don't think so. I'm that significant or important to write something about myself, honestly. I would,
um, it's the experiences, Jaggi. The experiences you've had are firsthand, and and of course momentous experiences. I mean, look at your experience at Kashmir or at Babri Masjid, and these are things, or even your interview with the North Korean, what's the word, president.
Kim. That was
Yeah,
the grandfather of the present guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So these are fabulous experiences, and you should um write them down. um because
I,
what happens is now there is such a glut, or hunger for non-fiction content
yeah.
and unique experiences, and this can sell on screen as well. The journey of a journalist. How many journalists of India can actually talk about having so many varied experiences?
Yeah.
You should definitely write it down. Yeah.
We'll take up your suggestion. I honestly have never thought about it, though I've toyed with the idea of non-fiction. But I'm so much in love with writing fiction, But yeah, that's a great point. Certainly, I have a treasure trove of experiences.
Yeah. So you've got to say, I shapat that you will write it.
Okay, and then maybe you can feature me on Savdan India.
Of course. यही है वो जर्नलिस्ट, यही है वो जर्नलिस्ट, देखिए।
यही है वो जर्नलिस्ट
सोना है
मिलियंस
तो
है
जाग जाओ। हाँ।
All right, that sounds wonderful, yours.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, I do come to my next question for the both of you. And the question is, when you write about different characters, how do you ensure that they feel authentically rooted in their culture while still relatable to, let's say, a global audience? Let's start with Jackie this time.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. If you're writing
Uh,
about
when you write about your characters, like
character,
in your fictional novels, how do you ensure that they stay rooted in their own culture? Since I'm sure both of you write in a very Indianized and even specifically rooted in a state or rooted in a specific, community. How do you think that also, is relatable on a global level?
see, um, I'll put it in the broader issue, which especially happens with fiction writers in India, and then I'll relate to your question. Never forget that fiction writers, you can call them crime writers, some or maybe thriller writers or whatever. You are actually at the end of the day, you are competing with foreign writers for market share for the sale of your books. Even today, people are still inclined to pick up an Alistair MacLean or a Desmond Bakley or whoever the new thriller writers are, Daniel De Silva, as compared to Indian writers, because there is still a perception that the Indian writers really don't know what they're talking about. I'm being a little honest out here.
And absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and partly we are also to blame because the quality of some writers, I'm not being elitist out here for God's sake, but is really not that particular great. And unfortunately, people always compare. यार अंग्रेजी तो लिखनी नहीं आती आप लोग writers बने चले हो. So that unfortunately is a problem. So there's a bit of an uphill struggle out here. You'll find nonfiction, as AB rightly said, is far more acceptable because that's a genre we take to more easily. So the true test of character really is how true you are to your Indian surroundings, your Indian settings, instead of aping what a Western writer has done. And that, unfortunately, is a big problem with many writers. And I take your point completely. Your characters have to be not Indianized, but they have to be Indian. They have to be from within the milieu. They have to be. So, for instance, in my latest book, Those Who Wait, not that I haven't been to JNU for a number of years, but there's a significant part of JNU which is there in that book. Um, there is also a little bit about the Maoist insurgency in this book. And again, I'll be honest, I haven't been to Jharkhand or something recently. I used to do a lot of these travels in troubled areas much earlier when I was an active journalist. But a lot of experiences are still relevant. So the point which I'm making is that you have to relate your subject matter to real occurrences on the ground, be it fiction or non-fiction. The moment you falsify your narrative or you anglicize your narrative, then you are off the mark. Then it doesn't make sense. It is not believable to the reader, and that I think is a big challenge for the yeah.
That is
Yeah.
very truly said. What about you, AB?
So I write non-fiction, but in a fictional narrative, real incidents, and so for me, it's very very important for me that I capture the milieu. And absolutely, what Jaggi says, you can't be inauthentic. The reader will smell you out that you're trying to be pretentious or you're just trying to be a pretender. So one of my tropes is my readers now tell me I have tropes, which I मुझे हंसी भी आता है कि भैया मेरे tropes है मेरे पास, is that I write in multiple languages. Like for my first book, which was called The Deadly Dozen, India's Most Notorious Serial Killers, 12 serial killers of India, true stories. So they were across regions. What I really wanted to do was um, to get the reader to speak the local language. So the dialogues of the 12 stories, I mean, most of them are
Right.
written in Malayalam, Tamil, Bangla, Assamese,
Wow.
Marathi, Punjabi. So when you're reading it as a reader, you are Otto Shankar talking in Tamil,
Mhm.
or you are Darbara Singh talking in Punjabi,
Right.
which helps the reader to really get into the heads of the killers. So that's I use multiple Indian languages. Like the hills are burning. There's Tibetan, Nepali, which I speak, Hindi, Bangla, English, and the Lepcha language called Rongring, because my characters are speaking those languages,
Right.
right? And I wanted that to be authentic.
Yeah.
One of the most irritating things, which now gets to me, is like for example, when you watch Slumdog Millionaire, they're all talking in English. I mean, that's
Mm.
bollocks. That's absolute bollocks. You
Yeah.
know, the what would I mean? We are living in an age of subtitles now. I mean, look at Parasite, a film
Parasite.
that did so well. I mean, no one was complaining about subtitles anymore. It's the content, right? I mean,
Right.
let the characters speak in their own language.
Correct.
you know um, so we have to be authentic as storytellers. Or even in my the one which I wrote before this, it's called India's Money Heist, based on India's biggest bank robbery, in Chelambra, which took place in
Mm.
Kerala. I have m- i have multiple dialogues in Malayalam. I don't know that language, but I spoke to people. I got, when you're watching a South film, they
Yeah.
always have something called the punch dialogue,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
The hero or the villain will come out with a punch dialogue. So my book has punch dialogues in Malayalam,
Much.
you know, so analogies and things like that. So I really enjoy writing in multiple languages. It helps me as an author to also really get into the nuance of the characters,
No,
because
I
the way
completely, yeah, I
it,
completely take your point. And there is this phrase, of course, lost in translation. And just to give a quick point or to your, or adding to your point, you know, uh, like my wife and I, we were very fond of these Scandinavian crime series,
Hmm,
And sometimes these options can't choose the language, and we never ever watch it in English, but in the language, whether it is Swedish or Danish or whatever, because the flavor, The moment you start, that translation or that English version comes, it's gone for me, for us. Yeah, and you're right. Subtitles are the way to go. Um, just and a very interesting point about your first book, which you mentioned. Just to add to that, I also love these series about these serial killers, and surprisingly, the Koreans make the best series on serial killers. Um,
Yeah,
they're
Memories of a Murder.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. These guys are absolutely incredible. The kind of research and the kind of,
Yeah,
and even the acting potential and the direction, everything,
mm,
they're incredible. These guys.
That sounds great. Actually, that is like I was thinking about it. Okay, I'm no writer by any means, but I am actually a psychologist. So I am a counseling psychologist, and very recently, as I was finishing up my master's, and I did my master's in something called the psychosocial clinical studies. And so, in the process of that, like one of the things that we were required to do, it was write a dissertation, right? So I decided to do a qualitative research of some mothers who had lost a child to suicide. And so I remember taking interviews of three women, and now these three women, they came from diverse social backgrounds. So one of the women, she spoke with me in completely English. One of the women, she spoke with me in Hindi, and there was another woman who was an old lady of around 80 years of age. She spoke to me in Haryanvi, which is a language that I understood. But the challenge that came to me in the end is that how do I submit a dissertation and how do I analyze everything that they have said in three different languages and come to a point of analysis. So a dissertation which was supposed to be, let's say, 300 pages initially, if all of them were in one singular language, it came out to be 1,000 pages in the end because all of the analysis had to be done in a separate language and then a combined analysis. So I truly understand the challenge that it takes on the part of the writer of, let's say, a book even, or I'm sure an AB, your task to write all of the different languages must have had its own challenges in itself
mm,
to compile that. And then again, for the reader, I'm sure my professor or my whoever my supervisor was had to, like completely throw their brains out to understand Haryanvi because they didn't know how. And how do you also incorporate subtitles, right? So because there are no subtitles in a book, so AB, when you write in, let's say, Nepalese or Assamese, is there also
yeah. I put the explanation in brackets straight after the dialogue.
that makes sense.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So if one is uncomfortable reading in the local language, you just skip to the
Hmm.
explanation in the brackets and continue.
Okay, that sounds great. All
Can I
right,
just
so
add some point to your? This is a very interesting thing which you just said because you have a psychology background.
yeah.
Um, so there's something which I didn't mention in my background. For a number of years, not full time, but as a volunteer, there's this place in Delhi called Sanjeevni, which is a mental health counseling. So I was a counselor, by the way, for a number of years.
Wow.
And you do a lot of these one-to-one, on all kinds of issues, mental health issues, depression, this and that. But for me, for my writing potential, all those experiences was a bedrock. That is what got me kick-started. So I'm
Hmm.
saying you have a writer in you. If you have
Waiting.
done psychology,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
just have you just have to start putting pen to paper, really.
yeah.
All right, I might be one day, maybe you never know. Okay, with that, I do come to the next question. So, both of you, you have experience with television and, everything with ranging from news and ranging from journalism to making shows of your own. So, how does writing in television, how does your characterization in on TV, and how does the process of crafting narratives on TV differ from crafting narratives on paper, let's say for a book? So, are there any specific challenges that you go through these in the differentiation or in like sort of bringing some sort of a harmony to the characters in that sense? Uh, Anybody can take it up. AB, let's start with you.
Yes, so writing for television or for screen is a little different to writing for books. And especially in television, we have to adhere to a budget. So therefore, my character suddenly can't vanish off to Rome, right? In my books, he or she can just take the next flight and go off to Rome. My universe is open in that sense. I can plot the story anywhere. In television, I can't because I have to adhere to a certain budget and all of that. Also, one has to be visual in a sense. When I write my books, I am very visual, knowing that I need the audience to see it. Um, so, like one of the readers wrote back after reading "The Hills Are Burning," saying, "I just finished seeing The Hills Are Burning," which was quite a validation of, for an author, saying, great. I mean, you managed to do that. So I write very visually, which is the same thing that I would do in a screenplay. So I take the craft of writing for television or for screen into writing for books. I use that same craft for the audience to really see it. Apart from that, on television, there's also uh, you know uh, time. Time is a factor. One has to fit the story, the plot line into episodes. So therefore, your writing has to be far more crisper than a book. And also with acts, like when you write a screenplay, you have the first act, second act, third act. So one has to keep that in mind as well. So there are different challenges, and yet they are very similar in certain aspects. Yeah.
Yeah,
True.
I completely endorse what AB said. See, even my books are very visual. In fact, I'm a real cinema buff, and I approach my books with what I call there's a Japanese director called Akira Kurosawa. So I approach it with the Kurosawa frame. If you see Kurosawa's films, they are so visually, they leave this imprint on your mind. And for me, writing is actually in a way picture telling to even more than storytelling, to that extent. And I completely agree. The challenges of economy, the challenges of keeping it tight, the challenges of these are all cinema television principles. And I honestly learned it the hard way because I did once a screenplay for Ketan Mehta, the director. And so I produced the first draft and I had no idea of a screenplay. He says, Juggi, you're very talented, but this can't go on screen. You have to, all the principles which AB just talked about, you have to incorporate all those principles. We have a budget, we have paucity of time, the characters need to be a little more, everything has to be tighter on leash. See, and then we really worked on that screenplay, etc. But the short point which he's making, and I completely agree with that. It's a discipline, television and cinema writing. It's a very different kind of discipline. As I gave you the example earlier, that news is very different from creative writing. Similarly, when you write fiction or non-fiction, that is completely different from when you write or when you create characters for television. But the good news is that today, because we have these 10, 15, even the Koreans have even 20 episodes for a serial, so you can flesh out, you can expand your story, you can take your time. That's the freedom which we have got today, unlike the earlier times. But at the same time, the principles apply. It has to be tight on a leash. You can't just go all over the place. That's not possible in television.
Right.
Truly said.
Absolutely. I mean, even if Jaggi, even when you were doing news reporting, live news reporting
Yeah.
from on ground, you knew when the event happens, and the reporter has to make
Oh,
the summary up right there and then, and you
absolutely.
knew that you had 90 seconds for a PTC, which is a piece to camera to sum up at the end of the story. You can't
Correct.
go beyond that 90 seconds.
Yeah,
So these are things, I guess, again, life experiences
that's
come into play, and therefore they form the bedrock for your own discipline of
Absolutely.
writing, or
And I think it's a great thing, because if you control narrative, if you learn the art of controlling narrative, see, writing is also about a certain freedom for expression, but at the same time, it is also to a certain controlling of expression. It's both aspects go hand in hand, and it sounds very simplistic. It sounds great. Oh, I'll let my imagination run riot. But you can't do that. You have to control that riotous behavior into
yeah,
something which is like ordered, which is as I said, on a leash. It has to be done that way.
yeah.
Okay, so my next question, sort of building on this one, is for ABU. So as your book, it is coming to become a screen adaptation. And so what are your expectations and any involvement in casting decisions, let's say? How do you believe the screen adaptation will do justice to the book?
So there are two ways that the adaptations happen. Um, w- uh, One is where the company that has bought the rights to your book are open to suggestions, and they treat you like a partner. And there are, of course, other production houses who, once they've bought the book from you and you're over and done with, and one has to then sort of let go of the book emotionally, right? And say, okay, it's gone. Now the baby is has left the house, the baby is gone to college, and that's it. You've got to let go. But there are other, like for India's Money Heist, which is going to have a screen adaptation soon. The production house that's bought the book are very cooperative in that way. They asked me how I saw how I saw the book coming to screen, and I said I would prefer it if it's in the language of Malayalam. These are my cast options. I would think that these are the people who would fit, the roles. Um, but again, these are what we call a wish list. Uh, for example, I can dream of having Amitabh Bachchan in all my you know adaptations, but if he doesn't have the time, or if the production house can't pay him his remuneration, then it doesn't matter. um, but then, yeah, so the production house has been open, um, and we've had lots of conversations about the book and everything, but then one has to also sort of learn to let go, because then the director comes in with a vision. um, you know the producer will come in with a vision, and one can just hope for the best that they do justice. Um, yeah, that's the way it works.
That sounds great, AP. Okay, Jackie, my next question is for you. So, since you were a TV journalist and you covered a lot of sensitive topics like that of Babri Masjid demolition, how do you handle, let's say, just for yourself and people who read your work and who go through your work as a journalist, how do you handle the emotional impact of such sensitive issues?
I don't see too many people who have the emotional angle in news nowadays. It's like see, it's hard boiled commercialism. So you can take one particular side or you can take another side. We all know what's going on. See, the news business has changed completely. It's like a commercial commodity now. Let's be very clear. You know, people keep saying, "Oh, it's ideological. We live in a polarized world." Yeah, that's all fine. But at the end of the day, everybody's following. I'll just give an interesting example. Um, uh, I used to do this graphic comic series in the Times of India called Agent Rana for a long, long time. So I had this. I used to, kind of interact with the TOI people. So TOI has something very interesting. Everybody knows about the great communicator. Let's not even take names of ex-TOI, the guy who's now heading Republic. But what TOI does very smartly is they have a Times Now channel, which is obviously very pro-government. And then they have a Mirror Now, which, if you have noticed carefully, is a little anti-government. So this is the Times of India way of balancing things, pleasing all sides. So the news business is no longer about any emotions. I can tell you that it is all about serving corporate commercial interests. And if ideology or if all these things come in handy, you would deploy it. But I personally don't believe that people are doing it out of strong ideological convictions. It's actually pure commercialism. So that's my take on that.
All right, thank you. Okay, so with
and
that,
and and
yeah.
fear, probably, and fear as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
fear
al-
them.
that was there in our time when we were in Doordarshan News. That's there. That's been there through all our journey of the
Well,
Indian Republic.
but Doordarshan news coverage was still was still a little more balanced than, even though it was the government, um you know spokesperson, or the government news agency. I mean,
Yeah.
there was still a lot more openness and balanced news reporting in those days. Or maybe I was just a young kid, who couldn't understand the deeper politics and the meaning of it. But right now, you're right, it's just a business. And of course, the fear of saying something that might peeve off the people in power, and otherwise ED chacha aa jayega.
It's
So
see, these are running battles. See, at the end of the day, then we go to the larger question that what is truth? We are talking then that's a much larger debate.
mm,
What are ethics? What is morality? So we then go into a different sphere altogether, which again I think is a little let's scope out of the scope of this program. But the fact is, I agree. You know what AB is saying. Today we live in an age where priorities especially are very clear. There's no confusion. People know exactly what they want, and the other part of it is that they're not afraid to do whatever it takes to get that. I mean, it's as simple as this. So that's what is really going on. So whether the fear factor comes in, whether you're doing it out of, I don't think so anybody is doing out of conviction so much. um it's yeah, as we discussed, it's all these factors which are at play right now.
Right, that is completely true. Also, I think, like, as Juggi was telling us earlier, that, there was this one incident which shaped the entire book, that a man in the train, right? So, even when I was, in the process of writing my dissertation, I remember this 80-year-old woman that I interviewed. She said this one line, which then in the end, it became the heading of my, the entire dissertation. She said that फिर हमसे छीनना तो हमारी किस्मत बन गया और हम देना हमारी सीरत. So that was the one line that she said, and it's stuck with me so much that my entire book and my entire dissertation was shaped around that one sentence that she said. So I think, even though, like, in a lot of these commercialized process, a lot of these monetized processes, on a personal level, there has to be endless moments of personalization. Okay, that stuck with us, even though I do not align with that community or that ideology. This is something that person said on that exact moment and that day, which stuck with us, and thus came out this article, or thus came out this piece of literature, or this piece of television, right? So uh,
Can I just add a point here? Can I
yeah.
just very quickly see, ideology or what you believe in is a very personal thing. I'll be honest, even though my writings are very, very, liberal, by conviction, maybe my political ideologies might be a little different. But I think for the creative person, you have to keep in mind that your mind should be open to all aspects of creativity. And I'll give you a very interesting example. There are two political films which I have seen, which have always stayed with me, which I think are the greatest films ever made. One was Garam Hawa, for instance. If you've seen it, wonderful, because it's a film you shouldn't ever miss. And the other was this film of a film called Zed by Costa Gravas, okay, which I think is an all-time great political film. Now, both these filmmakers were hard left filmmakers. Maybe an ideology I personally in my life don't subscribe to, but that should not stop me from admiring and appreciating their work. See, whatever ideology you follow, as you mentioned the word woke, your woke, for instance, and I keep having these debates with my son. He's in the US. He's totally woke, absolutely, And I would be surprised if he's going on these protests, all this, what's going on in all these places in the US. And my ideology is a little different from his. So we keep having these debates, but that should not stop us from appreciating the other person's point of view. True creativity is that when you are open to thought, you incorporate those processes, and whatever your personal convictions, by all means, live by that. That's okay.
That's truly said. Okay, so with that, I do come to the last question that I have for the both of you. So, do you ever worry about the potential backlash or a negative reaction while depicting stories which maybe, let's say, portray our own country in a bad light? For example, I remember this movie, wonderful movie came out. It was called Lion, and it was about this kid who had, yeah, I'm
Saru,
sure, yeah,
Saru, yeah.
yeah, Saru. So I remember like following that, a lot of critics, they criticize the depiction of India and the depiction of the poverty and the focus on the poverty in that movie. So have you ever gone through such a backlash in which, somehow something which is so dearest to the people in our country has been, put in a bad light, and thus you face some sort of a backlash on it? Anybody can.
Maybe you go first.
So my books are not anti,
Mhm,
you know, India or whatever. Um, when it comes to say lion and things like that, I mean, it was the story of a kid who got lost, lived in the slums, was almost sold off, then got into an orphanage, then he went off to Australia. You can't have rainbows and palaces being shown as Dharavi slums. That is the world that the kid lived in, or for that matter, Slumdog Millionaire. I mean, every time a certain a person visits other cities, the state government puts up these banners to hide the slums. That's
mhm.
hypocrisy. Solve the damn problem. Get rid of poverty, right? Give them housing. You can't keep shoving things under the carpet and expecting it to, vanish when you're not dealing with the problem itself. uh, then what's the use? Then you can't say, oh, anti-India. We are what we are.
Right.
There's no denying it.
Mhm,
Yes, there are of course narratives. The typical white man narrative is always there. The savior narrative is always there. One has to combat that as well. I mean, there are narratives in the West which try to belittle India, and we definitely need to call them out.
mhm.
Um, but there are certain things that we have to accept as Indians. I mean, look at us as Indians. When we spit on the road, we pee on the road, we cross the road without traffic signal. The same Indian goes to Singapore, is standing for the traffic light to stop, and then he'll cross. What's the difference? It's the same person, right? It's the law of the land. Become stricter. It's as simple as that. That's the way it is. So I don't write. I mean, I haven't faced that. For Hills Are Burning, I had to be very, very careful on the way I wrote it because I wanted to be as authentic as possible. Gorkhaland being a very, very emotional issue.
Yeah.
The last book that came out on the issue was a Booker Prize winning book um, that I think was completely biased and wasn't the true image and the truth of what happened in that region. Um, I mean, not that I'm judging her quality of writing. Her quality of writing is fabulous, but what she wrote was crap. Um, the Hills Are Burning is an insider's view, and so I had to be really, really careful of the way I wrote it, that I didn't bullshit my way through the narrative. Um, so yeah, so one has to be careful of when we are writing nonfiction, especially of trying to get a balanced view. Even as a writer, one will take a side. Even if one wants to be um, non-biased, by the end of the narrative, you will find a leaning towards a certain side. And the hills are burning is an emotional leaning towards Gorkhaland, or the people at least, because it's the people who suffered in the end. The politicians come and go. They'll use the people, and then they'll vanish after getting their agendas. So yeah, so no backlash yet, thankfully. Fingers crossed.
Just wanted to ask you a question, AB,
Yes,
because
sir.
you would be writing from a twin perspective about Gorkha land, where obviously you have stayed there, you've studied there. Uh, but I also take it the fact that you're also a Bengali, okay,
Hmm.
which gives this added impetus because the
Hmm.
that framework becomes a little different when you are talking of Gorkha land. So, how do you deal with these two? There's a certain, how do I put it? The Bengali perspective is bound to be a little more different, I would say. I'm not too sure if that's a right word.
Um,
Uh, how,
I
how do you deal with
completely,
that?
I yeah, yeah. So I completely understand because at one point of time, Bengalis were being asked to sort of leave.
Yeah.
There was a bit of a lot of tension in that area during those days. Um, when I was growing up in boarding school, the image that was told to us is that the armed forces were the right people and the Gorkhaland insurgents were the wrong people. It
Mm,
was a very clear black and white.
mhm.
Once I grew up, I realized that it's all gray, right?
Correct.
So the armed forces weren't exactly, the saviors. They were mercenaries who had been hired from the Chambal region. They were CRPF men with earrings and handlebar mustaches
Hmm.
who were going around pillaging, raping women, killing people. Um, you know, so suddenly there was this, oh my God, I didn't know this as a kid.
Mm,
Um, and of course, there was the in-faction fighting between the GNLF and the GBC, which
correct.
led to more killings of the innocent. So it exactly wasn't black and white.
Mm,
It
mm,
was a complete gray area.
mm.
And for me as a Bengali, I consider myself more of a local now, having lived there,
Sure.
for almost 12, 14 years.
Mm,
I speak the language, and so for me, I looked at first I looked at it as a macro point of view, and then when I studied it, I realized that a lot of things were amiss. And so I mean, the book is a sympathetic look towards
fair,
Gorkhaland at the end of the day,
fair enough.
but my characters are, as you said, the characters I have placed are people. So it's a memoir, but I've taken a bit of uh, um creative liberty to create certain fictional characters to give so there's a man who comes in with his family. He's relocated to Kalimpong during the
Correct.
height of the insurgency,
Mm,
and so he becomes the Bengali.
correct.
He is the outsider who can't come to terms with what's going on. So it's
Yeah.
yeah.
So just to your earlier question about India and everything, and why I asked this question to AB, and I'll put this in context. See, I'll narrate my own experience. For instance, like I'm a Punjabi Sikh, okay, shorn of my hair, but still a Punjabi Sikh, and whether I like it or not, there's a part of me which will always view Indira Gandhi, for instance, with a certain degree of complexity. I mean, for me, for instance, Operation Blue Star could have been handled in a different way. It was not the right way what she did. Though I can understand the compulsions and all that, there was a political angle to it. So these are complexities of, because as Indians, we wear one hat as Indians, we also wear another hat as ethnicities and people who have a certain we are brought up in a certain milieu, we are brought up in a certain framework of whether we want to call it religion, caste, or ethnicity, or whatever you want to call it. to come back to your question, this point to my mind always escapes the Western mind. Uh, See, I what I'm not against. They can show India as a string pool as far as I'm concerned. That doesn't bother me. What irritates me is this coloring that everything has to be according to a Western ideal. Okay, that irritates the hell out of me, because these people out there, and it's like somebody sitting on a pulpit and he's saying, okay, tell yourself about this, we are giving these prescriptions, which is very, very irritating to me. As I said, we are a complex people, we have various complexities, we deal with that in our own way, we know best how to resolve it. The Western mind is not equipped to understand these complexities. They still operate, and even though people are not many people in the West actually are going to the church, especially in Europe and all that, but they still operate on the old principles of this is sin and this is right and this is wrong. The world is a far more complex place where we live in, and the Western mind doesn't understand that. So just to answer your question, the depiction is usually way off the mark when you see
Mm.
it in a Western movie or literature, because they just don't understand the complexities in India.
Yeah, and somebody had mentioned that we are actually Europe in one country.
Correct. Correct.
We are so diverse from each other.
Correct.
Language, dialect, food, cultures, ethnicities, history.
Absolutely.
So we are bloody complex, and it's the Western the people who came in and buggered it all up.
Totally.
300 years ago or whatever, they came. We were a damn good society. You know,
I agree with you.
we were the richest in the world. They came, they looted, pillaged not only our wealth but also our culture.
Culture. Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
they complete. What is America? America is not just a country. Uh, they are what's the word? They basically come into your country and with their culture remove everything that is ethnic. Right. Suddenly we become a hamburger nation.
Yeah.
That's cultural terrorism, if one can call it.
And
Um,
to give the hamburger analogy, we are like the meat which is chewed in from both sides.
both sides. Yeah, so we are complex, and usually it's the white man's narrative. I love Shashi Tharoor's speech, which he gave at I
At
think it was
Oxford.
at Oxford, calling out the white people. Um,
And in an
so
accent which was better than the British, by the way.
yeah, with his clipped British accent. Uh, Let me remind you,
Yeah, let's give a
he's a
socket back to
dude.
the Brits
He's
the
a
way it should be
dude.
done.
He's a dude.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right, guys, with that, we do come to an end of our frontlet session for PVLF. Thank you so much for joining me. I had a wonderful time. I hope you both did too. And I'm looking forward to reading both of your books
Yay.
now that I know more about it. And I will definitely will be ordering some from Amazon today. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day ahead. And thank you so much for joining me, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you. Thank you so
thank you.
much.
And bye, Abby. Great talking to you.